Welcome, Elliott. Thank you for talking to me today. First of all, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me. My name's Elliott Lancaster, and I'm a trustee of Spirit of Peace.
Wonderful. And I've been reading your bio, and I learned that you helped your family to avoid homelessness, which was a great responsibility at such a young age. And homelessness has been an important cause for you since then. So, what campaigning have you done on this issue, and how do you think homelessness could be better addressed?
Yeah, so I actually established an organisation called Rotaract. I established the Keele University club, and as a part of that, we did lots of fundraising, lots of campaigning. So I worked with lots of local homeless shelters to support individuals who are currently suffering with it at that given moment in time, but also looking at proactive measures. So some of the signs to look out for when people are in extreme poverty who are about to go into homelessness.
Right. Then you've also campaigned on the issue of carbon neutrality. And
Yeah.
some people might not have heard of this before. So, can you just explain a little bit about what carbon neutrality is and why that's valuable?
I'd be delighted to. So, carbon neutrality is where an organisation aims to basically have net zero carbon going into the atmosphere from their operations. So, there's lots of technologies and that can be implemented by organisations to both reduce and mitigate how much carbon they're actually emitting, as well as offsetting schemes as well to reduce that to get to the optimum zero figure.
Lovely. Can you tell us more about some of the organisations that you've worked with on carbon neutrality?
Yeah, so I'm a trustee of Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. So as a part of that, I'm chair of their sustainability project group, and I developed some internal policy with my fellow trustees to get us to become carbon neutral by 2030. And we're looking at nature-based solutions as well as our actual operations, implementing things like solar panels, ground source heat pumps, and a variety of other measures. But I've also been working with Keele University and for a lot of SMEs in Staffordshire as well to understand what their operations are like and actually how we can support them to become carbon neutral as well.
Right. Well, you might be interested to learn that the college where I studied, Wolfson College, Oxford, is also working towards being more sustainable.
Wow.
And several of the other Oxford colleges are also working on their carbon neutrality. So I think that there's some progress certainly within universities. Um,
Fantastic.
do you perceive that this is something that we're progressing with in general?
I believe it is something that we're progressing with. I think the debate is actually how far are we progressing and at what pace. But I think there's definitely some very exciting things happening, particularly in the higher education sector, developing new technologies. So at Keele University, which is where I'm doing my PhD, we've developed something called Hydroploy, where we're introducing hydrogen into heating systems, which will be done at Keele University campus, but then that'll be applied by Siemens to hopefully the rest of the UK soon. So I think there's lots of both policy and practical measures that can be implemented to get us to where we need to be. It's a very exciting time.
What would you say to an individual or an organisation who is interested in becoming carbon neutral, and what are some first steps that they could take to pursue it?
I'd say now's the time to get involved in becoming carbon neutral. Don't be put off by the variety of things that you can do. The first thing to do would be to actually look at what you're currently doing, putting together like a carbon neutrality plan. And a carbon neutral calculator is something that can be quite easily downloadable off the internet. They come in the forms of Excel sheets, and you just basically input your figures in, and it'll give you an estimate of what your carbon emissions are like and actually how you can improve on that. And there's a lot of support out there and lots of supporting organisations that will quite happily get in touch with you.
Great. And is there any specific website that you have that has a great calculator on there?
Yes, so well, we've developed one personally within Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, and that's something that is openly available. So I don't mind if anyone needs to get in touch. I don't mind sharing a draft document of that, or SBEN as well. Provide lots of good support with that. But I'll be more happy to discuss that with anyone if they want to reach out.
Wonderful. And another project of yours, which is in the sustainability sphere, is this organisation Utter Rubbish, which you founded in 2016. So, can you tell us a little bit about how that organisation worked and what you were trying to achieve with that?
Again, I'd be delighted to. So it's a social enterprise, and I established at the start of my second year of university. I was doing a work project placement at the time with my local authority, and I didn't realise until then like how low recycling rates are, contamination, and how actually residents might think they're doing the right thing, but communication isn't quite there, and their practices actually mean that the race that they are trying to recycle ends up having to get burnt because it's the wrong sort of waste that's they're recycling in different categories. So it was mainly about communications between local authorities and residents, in terms of what can be recycled, what contamination is, as well as just trying to improve general practices around sustainability.
Thank you. So, what are some of the common mistakes that people would make? Things that perhaps they thought were recyclable and actually aren't, or that fall into a different category from what people might think?
Um, well, the issue actually is that there's 393 different waste collecting authorities across the UK, and they all have very different practices. So some things can be recycled in one area and can't be recycled in another area, just because of the internal practices that are used in the facilities that are available in that local authority area. So you could have a variety of plastics, for instance. There's countless types of categories of plastics, and some of them can be recycled, some of them we can't recycle yet. And of course, there's a grey area in between depending which local authority area you're in.
Right. And what kind of strategies did you find were effective for helping along that communication?
So we developed an app in order to do that. So it's got proactive push notifications whereby residents would download the app, input some of their personal details, and just remind them in terms of when your bin's going out, what can go in it, and also some of the common myth busting as well.
Right. So, is that project still ongoing, or is it something that's informed new projects?
It's a combination, so it's still ongoing. We're working with a variety of local authorities in Staffordshire at the moment, which is very exciting. But it's also started to inform some of the sustainability work that I would like to pursue as well.
And again, I am very interested to ask if you feel as though this is another area in which the UK is making progress, or is it a little bit of a situation where we take one step forward and two steps back?
Did you mean in terms of general recycling?
Yes.
Yes, I think we've have in the past made a lot of progress in terms of recycling, but I don't think that's at the moment it's a priority. I think there's other areas of sustainability that have started to outpace it. So it'd be interesting to see if there are any further developments. But I have been invited as part of various parliamentary receptions in recent months to discuss these things. So hopefully that will start to change.
Excellent. And what are these other areas that you mentioned that are now outpacing recycling as the area of focus?
Okay, so I think general carbon reductions is one of them. In terms, as well as that, there's hydrogen technologies, particularly hydrogen vehicles. There's a lot more investment going into those. I think it's fair to say that they've been neglected in compared to like EV technology in the past, and I think it's hydrogen's, to be honest, the way forward in terms of transportation. It's a more sustainable route than EVs. So I'm delighted to see more funding get going to that, and probably nuclear technology as well. I appreciate that's an area which some people may disagree, but I think if we want to become carbon neutral with some very strict targets like 2030, 2050, depending which country or institution you're a part of, it's the way I see it is it's the only way we're going to be able to do that with nuclear technology.
So when you say EV, is that an electric vehicle?
Yes, an electric vehicle, yes.
Right, and I think it may be that other people like me have heard of electric vehicles and maybe have heard some things about the growth of electric vehicles very recently, but might never even have heard of a hydrogen vehicle. Is that something we're likely to be hearing more about?
Definitely. And the reason why that was is because the amount of government subsidies that went into vehicles was focused mainly on electric vehicles, not to the technologies. And now it's started to shift, and there's more funding going into hydrogen vehicles. We're seeing prototypes come into place, but they're mainly being used for larger vehicles, and so like buses, coaches, as well as some industrial vehicles as well.
And is that something where feasibly we could see people kind of stocking up at the hydrogen pump?
I think that's personally the way forward is by transitioning over from fossil fuels to hydrogen in order to adapt some of the infrastructure, but also create a lot more jobs in the sustainability sector as well.
Right. Um, And then we also have some very interesting findings of your research. What would you say is your general research area first of all?
Okay, so my PhD is actually in management. So I'm looking at responsible enterprises and doing a comparative analysis across the four nations of the UK. So as a part of that, I'm looking at organisations with either social mission or an environmental mission, and practices that are supporting them achieve those missions. But I'm also doing a lot of research outside the area, mainly in interdisciplinary learning in higher education.
Right, and interdisciplinary learning and blended learning as well. I take it that that's learning online as well as learning in person. Obviously, that's a topic that's very much of interest to people right now.
Definitely, we've seen a takeoff of blending learning practices just because there was no other way over the pandemic in order to do those, and it's actually really exciting to see the technologies that are being implemented. To some people, it may have been mainstream before the pandemic, but of course, there is a balance there. Actually, seeing how like mental health provisions, for instance, can fit into that and make sure that students are being supported.
So, do you see lots of positive potential then in blended learning models?
I do. I think it actually provides a lot of flexibility, which students have benefited from. I've seen a lot of good student feedback come back from that. But of course, there is a balance. Then students would like to see some smaller group work sessions taking place face to face, where possible. But I think a blended approach is actually the best approach.
Great. And what have you picked up in the course of your research about interdisciplinary learning? What kind of contexts have you looked at that in?
Yeah, so I actually helped develop and co-founded a set of modules, which were interdisciplinary modules. So any undergraduate student at Keele University can now take these modules, not depending on what course they're on. So you could have a medicine student and you could have a humanities student doing the same modules on the same course. And I think it's a really nice area of incubation for students from different courses to get together. And there's modules in entrepreneurship, modules in sustainability, lawmaking as well. So there's a variety of different areas which are applicable to students no matter what they're studying.
That sounds like a great thing to have the opportunity to study. And do they receive some kind of degree credit for that, or is that an extra bolt on?
They do. So as a part of the course, you do have elective modules, so you can take those outside your area of which your course is in. And if you do take enough of these modules as part of the elective pathways program, you can actually get it included on your degree transcript as well.
And you've also been recognised as Trustee of the Year for your work with Support Staffordshire. So would you like to tell us a little bit about that organisation and what your work with them involved?
Support Staffordshire is like a bit like a Chamber of Commerce organisation. And they did an annual award ceremony, invited me based on my work with the charities that I've been involved with, such as Staffordshire Wildlife Trust, to present me the awards. It wasn't work that I'd done with them. It was an award that they presented based on the work that I'd done with other organisations.
Right, I see. You've said that if you are chosen as the winner of the Chegg Global Student Awards, you'd like to set up a network through which students can help to tackle global issues such as hunger and poverty. And what do you think that students in particular can do to make an impact?
I think students actually have a very strong voice, and we've seen examples of students making a massive impact in this area. And I was very lucky to interview students on the Chegg.org Global Student Prize who are doing exactly that. And I think it's about collaboration between students and wider society that can actually get things done.
And you've also mentioned that you want to address digital poverty. Is this in the UK in particular or worldwide? And why is this such an important issue?
It's worldwide, and we have seen a prominence of it over the pandemic. Students not having access to devices or compatible devices, so they've not been able to participate in classroom-based learning. Whereas before the pandemic, they may have had access to these through libraries and other facilities that just didn't have access to at that given moment in time. So I think it's an area which is massively important, and I think there's a lot of funding that's actually needed to go into support students not only just get access to devices and software and a variety of other measures, but actually get training on those as well. Because we have a very diverse society, and I think that's such an important thing to have individuals get together from different areas. But of course, supports that they may have had previously is different as well. So it's important to make sure that that's addressed.
So is that something that you feel goes across different age groups as well?
It definitely there is huge barriers across age groups, and the students population does have those barriers as well as other demographics.
So you've done work which brings different sectors together, and you've done work which brings academic disciplines together. So would you say that this collaborating across established boundaries is an important part of creating change and progress?
Definitely, because what we're facing are global challenges. We've talked about climate change earlier, and in order to address these things, we have to work together across sectors in order to make a long-lasting impact.
And finally, we've been very lucky to have you also as a trustee of Spirit of Peace. So what has this process been like for you? And is there anything new that you've learned through your work with Spirit of Peace?
It's been a fantastic process, and I'm delighted to have been appointed a trustee. And I'd recommend other young people and of course anyone generally to think about becoming a trustee of an organisation such as Spirit of Peace. And I think it's such a supportive organisation. There's a lot that I've learned personally from the process. So I think it's something that definitely people should consider.
Right. And is there anything else that you want to tell us about before we wrap up the discussion?
Well, thank you ever so much for having me today. It's been an absolute pleasure to be a part of this interview series.
Thank you.